Hello, and welcome to Making a Difference.tv. I'm your host and creator of the station, Making a Difference.tv, Brian Porter. And today I have a very, very special guest, somebody I've tried to hook up with for years now. This amazing organization called Fellowship of Intentional Communities. I call them the head of it, but they kind of like run everything on a collective basis. It's Sky Blue from IC.org. Welcome to Making a Difference.tv.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, I mean, I've been trying to connect with you guys for a long time. I know you're so busy. I'm so glad. And I finally actually, I'm moving into an intentional community myself, which is under within your network. But let me just ask you a bit about your life history in terms of you're living in one of the, I'd say, longer living intentional communities in the U.S. called Twin Oaks. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. Yep, yeah. And Twin Oaks just had its 50th anniversary this year.
Wow. Yeah, that that ranks up there as being well established. That's super. So what was your journey? How did you end up getting to Twin Oaks?
Well, I definitely have a somewhat unique story there. My parents actually met there in the late 70s. I wasn't born or raised there, but they did meet there. I did spend a small amount of time there as an infant. Went back, we did a visit when I was about 4 years old. And so some of my earliest memories are being there then. So, it's definitely been in my consciousness for more or less my whole life. And my parents were certainly from that culture, and raised me with those values. So when I was 19 and had dropped out of college and gone wandering around the country, I was on the West Coast. I grew up in California, was on the East Coast, just, traveling around, and was like, hey, maybe I'll go check out Twin Oaks, and showed up and did a visitor period there. And, it just immediately felt very comfortable. I've always had aspirations for helping start a community. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to join, but ultimately decided to join. Wasn't sure how long I would stay, but ended up falling in love, having a kid, which tends to root you to a place. And so now here we are, about 18 years since I did my visitor period there at Twin Oaks. And yeah, I mean, I've been very involved with sort of the outreach and networking side of things, and all the time that I've lived at Twin Oaks. For a long time, I was one of the delegates to the Federation of Egalitarian Communities, which is a smaller network of communities that Twin Oaks is a part of, that focus on income sharing and egalitarianism in different forms. And then in the last few years have got involved with the Fellowship for Intentional Community, which is a much broader networking organization, spanning the continent and international, focused on all different kinds of intentional communities, from eco villages to co-housing, housing co-ops, income sharing communes, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, when you check the site, I strongly encourage people. I got the book of all the communities. It's incredible resource. You guys put out some of the best information you can find anywhere on the internet through your subscriptions. Your site is amazing, folks. I tell everybody in alternative radio, I says, you want to live an alternative lifestyle, you want to become part of the solution, get your butt into an intentional community. They're all over the place, folks. There's no excuses.
Yeah, they really are all over the place. Yeah, I mean, and I think, there's the question of, like, why an intentional community? Like, why would you live that way? And I think there is a way in which intentional communities are very much this sort of direct attempt to find solutions to the biggest problems facing humanity at this point. I mean, I think the problems that face humanity are social, they're economic, they're ecological, and they're integrated. They're all connected to each other. And intentional communities, in a similar way, in a very holistic, integrated way, seek to address all of those issues. So, there are obvious social benefits to living in intentional communities. There's obvious economic benefits. You share more, it's cheaper to live. And obviously there's a major ecological benefits. You share more again, and you are just consuming and wasting less. And there's just this integrated, holistic aspect to it that I think is both really compelling and both really radical in how it is fundamentally trying to address the problems we're facing.
It's also good for the mind, because I've not yet met anyone who's living in an intentional community that didn't seem to understand the situation we face as a species. There's just being around other people who are aware, who are trying. It's extremely good for your understanding of the situation we face right now, which very few people understand if they're just living in the mainstream society and they're going along with the the dominant ideology of just consume, 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 and don't worry about anything other than yourself.
Yeah.
So it's a great place to get educated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's the learning curve, right? Not everybody makes it, I'm sure, into intentional community. I mean, actually, the one I'm going to now in Lanark, an hour outside of Ottawa. I'm up here in Canada, in Toronto right now, sort of in between, moving bit by bit, over the next month or so. And he's had a lot of people go in there and come out, in and out, in and out.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's not a one-way ticket. You got to play around. But thank God there's so many, because you can find where you belong.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I think that is one of the benefits. There's so many different kinds out there, so you can really sort of look at what you're interested in, whether it's, if you're interested in living rurally or urban, if you want a smaller group that's a little more familial, or a larger group, the different focuses that different groups have. Some are much more just agriculturally focused, others are much more education focused, others don't necessarily have a strong focus. They're just, trying to live good lives. So I think, there is that broad range. There's also the question of, like, do you want to join one, or do you want to help start one? And this is a important question that a lot of people sort of look at. And there's arguments in either direction. There's many communities out there need people. Like they're looking for members. So filling up the communities that already exist and making sure that they're thriving is an important thing. But also, the more communities that exist, the more options there are, the more nodes there are in the network. So we obviously want the movement to be growing in that way as well.
Great. One of the things that I've noticed is that within the community that you're in, within the network, you're very well connected. You share a lot, and not just in community, but between community, and this is beautiful.
Yeah.
The next step in your evolution, and this is part of my goal in life and why I set up Making a Difference.tv and previous show, I Am Nature, is to grow the community by reaching out to those that don't even know about it. They have no idea these things exist. And believe me, I mean, I'm shocked when I talk to alternative media people who are out there searching for solutions, who have never heard of IC.org. It blows me away.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's been interesting is that in the last number of years, there definitely seems to have been a striking increase in the amount of media attention. I mean, just from even from more mainstream media outlets. But off the top of my head, between Twin Oaks and other communities, we've had Al Jazeera America do a piece on intentional communities, CNN.com, Yahoo News, New York Times, The Atlantic, ABC Nightline News came to Twin Oaks, and then lots of smaller outlets, more alternative stuff as well. But there's clearly something going on here, right? Because especially the more commercial mainstream media outlets, they're not going to do things if they don't think their audience is actually interested in it, because they've got advertisers to appease, right? So clearly they think that there is an increase in interest. Clearly they think there's something here that their audience is wanting. And so clearly there is this uptick in interest going on in intentional communities. And I think it's because, as time goes on, I think the fact that there are these major problems facing humanity at this point is becoming just more a given. Like there's not really a whole lot of question anymore from increasing numbers of people. And then naturally, as the acceptance of what's going on naturally builds, then naturally people are looking for solutions, and then media is responding to this. Media is saying, okay, what's going on out there? And so I'm really pleased, to see that even some of these more mainstream media outlets are recognizing the value and importance of what it is that we're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good to hear. Well, I know there are different. There's even like reality TV shows now based upon
Sure. Oh
living.
yeah, Twin Oaks gets contacted by reality TV shows somewhat frequently, and some intentional communities have had reality TV shows come, and it's worked out reasonably well. Twin Oaks is a little more averse to that sort of thing, so we haven't jumped on that bandwagon. But yeah, there's quite a number. There was even a community, a small group in Eugene, Oregon, who actually did ABC's Wife Swap a number of years ago, and that was quite an interesting segment. They actually did a reasonably good job of depicting the community. There was another, a much more progressive, the guy who did that documentary a while back called Super Size Me, did a thing called 30 Days, and he went to Dancing Rabbit Eco Village with a few people from New York City, and that was a very eye-opening experience for them, and the sort of cultural clash was interesting, and some pretty profound revelations from the people from New York City too, like how it affected them.
Did he make a movie based on that?
No, it was just a part of the series that he did, called, I think it was called 30 Days.
Oh, it was more like a podcast then, not like a documentary?
Or yeah, something like that, or yeah, web series. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll have to check that out. I wasn't aware of that one. So, okay, so yeah, it's great. So the people are realizing that there might be solutions out there that people aren't considering, and you're getting connected with the mainstream. But you yourself now, you're starting to reach out more on your own, which is fantastic. Now you've got something new that I just became aware of. I just actually officially joined a few months ago, and there's a podcast starting.
Yeah, we're going to start doing monthly webinars. It's, the first one is coming up in actually just a few days, Wednesday the 16th. And it's going to be a monthly thing. It's going to be live for members, so it's sort of a member benefit option to be able to participate live and ask questions and that sort of thing. And then we will be recording them and making them more publicly available through that. And we're just planning on touching a wide range of different topics. The title of the webinar right now is the Community Builders Forum. The first episode coming up, we're going to talk about, well, the title is how do I get people to join my community? Lots of groups, like I said, need people, sometimes often struggle with how to get people to join. I get inquiries occasionally from people just out there saying like I got all these, I got my legal structure set up, I've got some land, how do I get people to actually join? And it's like, well, that's a great question. And sometimes it's very simple. Sometimes there are you're just not being effective in your outreach. There's just, there's some basic things around in the world that we live today around how marketing and promotion sort of stuff works that are not necessarily the way we would like it to work, but that's kind of how it is, and you need to utilize the tools that are available. And if you're not doing it well, you might just not be reaching the right people. But there's also other potential issues as well. Like sometimes groups, they want to live rurally, they want to be out in the country, they want to be doing more of a sort of homesteading sort of thing. Well, again, guess what? We live in a world where you still need money. And so if people aren't independently wealthy or have some kind of remote work that they can do, if you're in a place where there's not good access to jobs, or you don't have a cottage industry set up within the community, people are going to have a hard time living there. So there might be just some very basic sort of financial, logistical barriers at play there. Then there's also, this sort of the interpersonal stuff, and the sort of unfortunate bit about recruiting people to your community is that oftentimes the barriers are the things that you're going to have the hardest time seeing, because there might be something going on, some kind of power dynamics, control issues, security issues, something going on there that the people who have founded the community, or the person who's founded the community, is having a hard time looking at. And so, they think they're doing everything right, and they are to a large extent, but there might be something kind of with themselves that they're just not quite looking at. So So hopefully, with this webinar, we'll take a look at some of that. So all this sort of range of stuff. This will be the first one. It'll be interesting to see how many people come to the first one. It's our first time running it, so it might be a little rough. We'll definitely redo this topic, I'm sure, in the future. In case this one doesn't go very smoothly. But next month, we're going to have the former executive director of the Fellowship for Intentional Community, Laird Schaub, who is a kind of a legend in consensus circles, and he's going to do a session on consensus for us. And then, we'll kind of run from there and, again, to sort of touch on all the different kinds of topics of importance and interest to creating intentional community.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, yeah, I mean, the best way to learn is to do, right? And we all know that.
Sure.
For in the industrial communities. You're going to get better at this as you go. And I was looking at the magazine. I got the whole, folks, you got to join IC.org. For $15, I got, from 1971 to present, or 2014, that's 45 years of publications. I mean, full of ideas, solutions, microeconomies. I mean, these people, they really have their act together, folks. You got to get into this community. Even if you don't join, if you're thinking about it, you've got to start supporting this organization. I fully believe that you got to start thinking about it first and connect with people like Sky, who are living in them. And can people who are not a member of IC.org get access to these seminars yet?
Well, we haven't done the first one, like I said, but we are planning on recording them and making them publicly available. So they should show up on IC.org. I mean, once we've got a body of a few of them that we can make a good page for it, we'll put them up online. But yeah, as time goes on, yes, they will be made available for the public.
Awesome. Now, another thing I mentioned in my recent email to you is the idea of a homeschool network. Has anybody done that in IC.org? Because you basically have this huge array of people who are highly skilled in microeconomy development and sustainable economy development. And I think it would be a great thing to expose these people to the public within and outside of IC.org. And share this. And I'm basically advocating to most parents now, don't put your kid in regular school anymore. There's too many things going on there. There's not a lot of truth in the mainstream educational system. Mm-hmm. And we all have to learn to get off grid and to live in better harmony with the biosphere. And you're going to learn more about that through IC.org and Jen, the other big network centered out of Findhorn, than you will in school. So there's a great opportunity for a homeschool network to be created through Jen and IC.org.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, there's a pretty high percentage of people living in intentional communities who are doing homeschooling. So there's definitely a lot of experience there. I mean, as you're saying this, I'm like, oh yeah, that would be a great theme for Communities Magazine. Would be education in intentional communities, both young education, but also adult education as well, because there's a lot that happens available for adults too. Again, both all the skills that you can learn, but also on the interpersonal level as well. I mean, living in community is kind of antithetical to the ways that we were mostly raised. So it's not just that there's a lot to learn; there's also a lot to unlearn about what it is that we were raised with, and that what we need in order to not just live well in community, but live together as a species on the planet.
Absolutely, that's so on the point, or so illuminating. Because we basically, the reason I'm telling people not to send their kids to regular schools now is because you pretty much have to unlearn everything. I'm the way I am now because I just walked out of the mainstream university and took philosophy instead of science. Sure. What I was going to be an engineer or a computer scientist. And I said, something said, no, that's not your path. So I took an alternative path from at a young age, and it's created a very different human being. Even though I've never lived in an intentional community, I've lived in a way an intentional community lifestyle. It's kind of imagine I did it on my own in the mainstream. But there are people like me who are different, who aren't in intentional communities. So, and what we want to do, what I want to do is get these people together and help grow the intentional community movement. Even if you don't live in one, there's still room to help make them happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can be supportive, even if you're not planning on living one. I mean, I was, for a little while here, connected to a group in Charlottesville, Virginia, who was trying to form an eco village in the city there. You know, and I actually lived in Charlottesville for a number of years, in the middle of my tenure at Twin Oaks. Just, you know, I was doing some experimenting with different kinds of community building, and I wanted to try, you know, taking what I'd learned at Twin Oaks about community building and applying it to an urban setting, sort of unpacking all of the different aspects of Twin Oaks and seeing how it could be applied in a city with potentially more people. So made a lot of connections there, did some interesting stuff there. Ultimately decided to move back to Twin Oaks, you know, in part because of my son. He was with me a couple days a week in Charlottesville, but I wanted to be back in daily contact with him. But you know, one of the ththey that came out of my time there was a group that started coming together to try and form an eco village. And I wasn't going to live there, but they wanted me to kind of help work with them, and so I spent about a year and a half working with them, being on the board, you know, just kind of helping facilitate a lot of the board meetings, you know, just kind of helping point out the different ways that you know, things that needed to be addressed. So, you know, I mean, I think, you know, having just more brains, you know, and caring hearts in the mix in any forming project, you know, so yeah, if there's a group in your area that's trying to form and you don't really want to join, but you love the people and you believe in what they're trying to do, like, get on the board, you know, be active, go to work parties, make donations, all these sorts of things that you can do, you know, have open houses, you help get the word out, all this sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think really seeing intentional communities as sort of hubs, you know, that where a lot of this sort of education is happening, this learning, this growing, you know, and seeing what you can do to just support those hubs, I think is really important.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I totally agree. And is there anybody, I think this is one of my future goals. One of them is to create a rainbow warrior community and bring all the different races together, living together in one place.
Sure.
As an emblem of, and a representation of the prophecy, right? That this is what's going to bring the world back together, is all the races showing you can live in harmony and peace. But another thing, I've been getting a calling. I'm a very spiritual person. God, I mean, if I followed up on all the ideas I had, I'd need about 15 different lives simultaneously.
Sure.
One of the better ones that's come up is that the idea of creating a build community, a build group that would help people maybe find supplies, maybe certainly give them the skills they need to just get going, create a community center or a, you know, I'm not sure. My vision of creating a community is that initially you can bring the people together and just do a trial run. Like you could even go camping for a month. You could try, you know, just something, you know, less intense than the actual full bore, you know, trial. But what this group would do is go around and basically help, and they would be people who have lived in intentional communities and say, hey, we want to help you get going. We see the need for these. I see a lot of things going down soon in the mainstream system, and possible currency collapse. Definitely, there's a lot of people getting sick. Yeah, right. We need to do everything we can, in my opinion, to try to create more and more and more intentional communities.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I have a friend who, you know, in talking about intentional communities, there's two sort of different metaphors that you can use that I think are interesting. You know, communities often sort of take one path or another. So one metaphor is the lifeboat metaphor, that intentional communities are lifeboats for, you know, when the ship sinks, you know, that they can help you know, ferry people to some kind of better future. And I think that's really true. And so sort of building themselves up to be able to have the capacity to do that. I mean, I think increasingly, especially with what's going on in the world today, and in this country, intentional communities, that I've heard of a number out there who, are looking at how to be safe havens for immigrants and refugees and that sort of thing. So in a very direct way, looking at how do we extend what it is that we're doing to help support and protect the people who are most vulnerable in our society. Because I think the fact of the matter is that because of the dynamics of our society and who it is that has access to resources in our society, it is true that the intentional communities movement is predominantly a white middle class movement. And I think there's stuff there around accessibility, around cultural accessibility, around financial accessibility, that if we want to be as relevant and accessible as possible, if we really want to be a solution that the world can look to, we do have to make intentional communities accessible to people of all races, all classes, all genders, et cetera, et cetera. So looking at how do we really extend ourselves in that way, and that's not always going to be comfortable. Like, especially when you start looking at issues of race, it's what it takes. Most communities will say, "Oh, we value diversity," but what it actually takes to be a meaningfully inclusive community, a community that's really comfortable and friendly to all different kinds of people, again, of different races, but different abilities as well. When you start getting into physical abilities, neurodiversity, these sorts of things, like, what does it really take? And that's a challenge. Like, and it's going to be uncomfortable at times, and it's going to feel potentially even unfair. I think there's a saying that I really like, which is that when you go from privilege to equality, it can feel like oppression. And so I think this is a really important thing for people with privilege, people, especially, for somebody like me who is, basically white, cis male, heterosexual, college educated, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I'm the person with all of the privileges, so what is it that I need to do to make sure that I am really checking that privilege and making use of that privilege for the benefit of all people? So that's a big question that I always ask myself. And again, in the work of doing intentional communities, trying to extend that out, how can intentional communities really be these lifeboats that can really be accessible to all people, and really extend what it is that we're trying to do with this, like, meaningful response to the problems we see in society? How can we really make this available for all people? The other metaphor, so there's the lifeboat metaphor, then there's the spaceship metaphor. It's not just that we're trying to save people from the apocalypse. Like, we're trying to take off, right? Like, we're trying to do something really amazing, inspiring. We're trying to take these spaces of intentional communities and the space that they make to be able to experiment culturally, again, with our relationships, with how we express ourselves, all this sort of thing, and say, like, we're gonna take it into the stratosphere here. Like, this is not just about like fixing some problems. Like, this is about making a thriving, regenerative human society, in balance with the earth, where people are satisfied, where people are joyful, and so I like that balance of the sort of the lifeboat and the spaceship, like, and it's not necessarily an either or that way, but yeah, I think there's a lot we're trying to do here.
Well, I have another metaphor, and that's the fact that we're rebirthing the Indigenous community. We came here 500 years ago, and we basically said, no, our way's better, and we forced them off their land, and we basically murdered a lot of people. It's the numbers vary, but I've been told as many as 200 million or 100 million natives were taken down by various nefarious means. And what we're doing, because we are all natural beings, no matter what color you are, or whatever, we're all made of the earth. We're all natural beings. Once we come to that conclusion, we think we're basically being influenced by the past and the fact that we've made this huge mistake, and now we're recreating the Indigenous community.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think, you know, I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was maybe the Gary Snyder, philosopher, who talked about you know, how do you become indigenous? You know, and especially in today's world, like, what does that mean? And, you know, there's something to it where it's just a matter of kind of declaring, like, I am here, like, I am going to be here, you know, making a certain commitment to a place, kind of dedicating yourself to the earth, you know, to where you live, to the people that are there, you know, and just, yeah, just saying, like, I am of this place, like, kind of declaring it, you know. And I think you're right. I mean, I think the massive injustices that the people who came over from Europe to this continent committed against the native peoples here, as well as the Africans that were brought over as slaves. You know, there's still a lot of work to be done there to really reconcile and heal from that. And I think, you know, it's easy for a lot of white people to say, well, that was my ancestors, but the legacy of it is still alive and well, and as white people, we're still benefiting from that legacy, even if weren't the ones that committed it. So I think in addition to, you know, part of that commitment to place and saying I am of this place is being able to really sit with the deep pain of what has happened here, and looking for ways to really heal that and reconcile it. You know, not that you want to get, you know, completely mired in it. You know, it's not going to do anyone any good if you're just completely overwhelmed all the time. You know, I mean, it's the same thing with you know, just you know, looking at climate change and everything that's happening here. Like, we can overwhelm ourselves into paralysis if we're not careful. And I think it's why a lot of people don't look too closely at a lot of this stuff, is that it's just so overwhelming and painful when you really start to grasp it and sit with it. But then again, you know, it gets back to, you know, this is part of why we live in intentional community, is that there are people around us. Like, it's easier to hold this stuff, and it's easier to do something about it when we do it together.
Yeah, we're recreating the family of families.
Yeah.
It's basically what we are. We're a pack animal. We're a tribal consciousness. And this is getting back to the idea of we're trying to get back to the normal,
Yeah.
the good normal.
Right.
Not the bad normal that's been created. And as you say, we haven't stopped killing the planet. We have mining companies, we have oil companies. We are supporting these things by living in the mainstream. So this assault on nature, on the natural way of life, I understand there's only like 50 tribes left on Earth that are completely natural and untouched by our systemic destruction of the planet. So, yeah, so we really are, to me anyways, this is what attracts me, and it's sort of about 6 years now I've been on this trek to get back to nature, hook up with as many indigenous people as I can, the ones that I consider to be authentic, and you know, trying to recreate their culture. Are there any communities in IC.org that you're aware of? There's so many, I'm sure it's hard to keep track of them all, but that are an integration of native and say whites or blacks or a mix?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are some communities out there. I mean, I think, you know, as you go through the directory on IC.org, you know, you can you come across them here and there. I mean, there's not a lot. I will definitely say that, but they are out there. I mean, what's interesting too is that there is some interesting history here. I mean, some of the early communities that identified as intentional communities, and we're going back to the 1940s and 50s. Here, the term intentional community was sort of first coined around 1949. There's some interesting history here. So the current organization, the Fellowship for Intentional Community, was started in 1987, about 30 years ago. It's, you know, speaking of anniversaries, it's the FIC's 30th anniversary this year. But it was actually a reforming of an organization, the Fellowship of Intentional Community, that started in 1949. Now the wording difference is, you know, subtle but key. The old organization was Fellowship of Intentional Communities, and it very much was a a mutual aid network of specific communities that was governed by representatives from those different communities. It existed for a while. At some point, it kind of fell out of existence and then was sort of resurrected in 1987 with this more broader focus, the Fellowship for Intentional Community, really looking at this concept in a bigger way and all sorts of different kinds of communities, and how to support them and grow them. But some of the original, before the term intentional community came along, these kinds of communities were often referred to as cooperative communities, and there was connections to the Rochdale cooperatives from England and the larger cooperative movement of worker co-ops and consumer co-ops, agricultural co-ops, that sort of thing. But in the 1940s, some people started saying, there's really something we're trying to do here. Like, there's really something very mission driven. They wanted some kind of term to capture that, and so intentional community is what they came up with. And what's interesting is that a number of the early intentional communities were they were some of the first racially integrated communities around. Again, back in the 1940s and 50s, they were often Quakers, conscientious objectors, this sort of thing. So there is a lot of interesting history there from these different perspectives.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many. The permaculture movement is trying to bring back the most what's the word, productive and biodiverse system of agriculture based upon different climate zones and where you live on the planet. What IC.org is doing, and you doing, and what I'm doing is we're trying to bring back the diversity of human culture.
Sure.
Which used to be here. I mean, before we came here, there were 1,200 nations, and they lived in a clan system. So they had an understanding that you can't have too many people in one place. It just creates problems. So you got to break into smaller segments, clans, right? But you still have that same core kind of belief system. Beautiful. Yeah. But it all came from nature. You see, so what we're doing is we're really recreating this. And you don't even have to call it indigenous. Just call it's a natural way of living.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's the author Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote The Tipping Point. There was an essay he wrote that had to do with small group theory, and he looked at a number of different examples, and what he found was that large organizations that are basically focused on small groups within the organization just thrive better. That when you have, say, even if you have, he looked at this kind of mega church in Southern California of like tens of thousands of people, but the way it was organized was around these basically affinity groups of 10 or 15 people. And that was the focus. Like, that's where your primary attention was. And there was an immense amount of mutual support and mutual aid that was going on amongst these affinity groups. And it was clear that what was going on, and from different examples, is that basically the small groups were sort of a practice area for really living a caring and compassionate life with others, and that caring and compassion naturally started extending to people that the people didn't have as much direct contact with. So I think when we live these very individualistic, isolated existences that mainstream society has set up for us, we're not getting to practice how it is. I mean, because it's hard to care about somebody on the other side of the planet that you've never met and you have no idea about. But if we want to really live a society, like, we have to be able to do that. We have to be able to have compassion for and understand the impacts of our decisions on people on the other side of the planet, and make choices that are in alignment with our desire for everybody, for this world to work for everyone. And so I think intentional communities are a place where we really get to practice this stuff and be able to make better choices, not just for the people directly in our lives, but all around the planet. And then I think the permaculture thing is an interesting thing too. Intentional communities are these incredible laboratories where you can leverage the people power and the other kind of resources that a group of people have in order to say, okay, well, and I mean, I think the permaculture stuck still in, you know, individual households or like pieces of property where it's like, it's still like a person or a family who's trying to do their cool permaculture thing. And it's like, well, if we're really like permaculture, if we're really looking at permaculture, we have to be looking at the global ecosystem, right? Like it doesn't matter if your little few acre piece of property is a permaculture paradise. If everything around it is going to hell in a handbasket, it's not going to matter a whole lot. And these larger of things that are still very much human scales, but are how do people come together? And so there's very much this, you know, the people increasingly, the term social permaculture, I know is starting to become a thing. And so recognizing there are these very human, social, cultural elements, and then there's the like hands in the dirt aspects of permaculture. And again, intentional communities are these really great laboratories where all this stuff can come together and you can start experimenting, you know, I mean, all sorts of renewable technologies, you know, solar panels, these sorts of things. It's a lot easier to afford a PV solar array with a group of people than it is on your own. And, you know, getting yourself a start with that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, we need to experiment. We need to recreate. My view of spirituality is that it's an infinite journey, and that it's a constant process of recreation. And we can recreate the indigenous model, but it could be completely different. Sure. As long as it's natural, as long as we conform to Mother Nature and we don't spoil her beauty and her abundance, and we recreate it. Right. It really doesn't matter whether it's people living, you know, and worshiping a rock or whatever stream, or it's people who have an advanced system, what we call advanced technological system. As long as it isn't creating toxins and isn't interfering with this incredible biosphere, it's a huge range of possibility out there.
Yeah,
huge,
absolutely.
Huge. The bottom line is let's stop killing Mother Earth and each other.
Yeah.
It's really simple, basic founding principles that we have to understand and live by. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's a great introduction to what you're doing. Yeah, I was going to pick up on the idea of that, you know, a permaculture garden one here is, if it's surrounded by genetically modified farms, isn't making that much of a difference. But that lends me to a point about political party. But we can save that for a future interview. But I really want to thank you so much for what you've done, for your parents, for what they did.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
They really were, you know, pioneers, and that's it. We're getting back to the indigenous approach to living, which I think is the foundation of everything. From there, we can grow anything we want.
Yeah.
And thanks so much, and keep it going. And hopefully, we'll stay in touch, and I can help you with whatever projects you're working on too, because I'm all for outreach. I'm all for outreach and development of more and more and more.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, we've got to do this together. Like, there's no way. I mean, on all different levels, you know, growing this movement, you know, saving ourselves from ourselves on a global scale, you know, whatever it is, we've got to do it together. So yeah, I really appreciate you having me on your program and get an opportunity to talk about this stuff. It's what I do. I love it. I could just, you know, I could talk about this stuff all day.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about living in an intentional community. It's a nonstop process of problem solving and loving. It's just beautiful. It's so invigorating, and you don't get bored, that's for sure.
Right. Yes. Never bored. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Sky. And hopefully we'll have another one of these soon.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Love you, brother.